Um, Hi, I remember coming back in the early 70s, since I used to take us up to the Florida, to the field to train. Sometimes in the summers it was really, really hot, and we could barely keep our feet on the AstroTurf. And for a different change of pace, he would make us run the stadium steps and then come back down and stand on the hot AstroTurf with our legs shaking in rectangular stance and ki punch. And our legs would be wobbling from the, couple of runs that we made up and down the stadium steps. It was hard to do, but it was fun and challenging. Now, I remember back in 1974, just prior to when Sensei left to go back to Vietnam, he would bring us out to Florida Field, and we'd train. We'd have a real good workout. And this particular time, he had a class on, or a lecture planned on meditation. And it was wonderful. And in the background, because I have a tape of it, there was a wonderful thundercloud building, and it was just a real, ominous type of feeling. And he was, not only was he leaving us, and we were all excited about his new adventure to come, being able to go back home to a family that he hadn't seen in 4 years and really missed. And yet really excited about the last workout that he shared with us, and it was just a real memorable event. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
There's been real significant changes in Kung Nu. When we first started, and Sensei came back in 1971, when Sensei came, he didn't have a manual or a curriculum planned. He knew what he wanted to teach us, and it was I made efforts to make notes about the curriculum and about the patterns that I saw starting to develop, like with the kick combinations and the hand combinations. And from that, we formulated our first manuals that Sensei Lap spearheaded. And but just from putting together sheets of the various levels, 1 green, 2 green, green belt ranks, that's how we came up with a rough format. And Sensei would have real interesting language, not necessarily problems, but it was real humorous, because he would talk about techniques, and sometimes he couldn't find the English word or translate the Vietnamese word to the English word, and so it made the curriculum that we were developing towards real rich, and you can tell now how it's evolved, because we have a wonderful structure, and it's developing into hard and soft. And eventually what's neat is that it's going to come back full circle because of the number of facets in our style that we have. And it just reminds me of the time when he talks about the flowers in the garden, or we're all parts of an orchestra, or better yet, we're all parts of a diamond, multifaceted. And
I guess I'll start by reviewing how I got started in the style. Master Dong and I were graduate students at the Department of Entomology, working on our PhDs. And since we were students together and I found out he was teaching a class, I decided to begin. Most people think we started in the basement of the gym, but really we started in the first floor of the graduate student dorm, and we had to move the ping pong tables every night before we had class, and then move them back again. And he had a room up in the same dorm, and so often after that we would go up and study entomology afterwards, maybe have a couple beers and study. I was amazed that Sensei was working on a master's degree when he really had not had much English before he got here. And so I recall early on with his instruction, there was not nearly as much verbalization as there is today. It was a lot of demonstration of the technique, and we had to sort of pick it up from there, rather than him really breaking it down into the component parts as much as he does now. I also recall going through the system and not knowing what the tests were going to be like, because we were the first ones through. Several of us, Sensei Mary Davis and John Benson and Sensei Lap, several of us were the first ones through. We didn't know what to expect from any of the tests, and often didn't have much notice either. He'd say, well, next week we're going to do it. I recall that with my black belt test too. He'd say, tonight I want you to do bow, next time I want you to do this, next time I want you to do breaking. So it was kind of difficult to prepare. I also remember working out in Florida Field. Several of our early classes had about 200 people, and it's like a sea of students almost filled up the whole field. And it was nice that we could run laps as a sort of a warm-up. and we could go up and down the stadium and get good and tired before we did the actual workouts. And we worked very, how can I say it, very often. I recall being a grad student, I wasn't going to go anywhere during breaks and so forth, and I recall one time that Sensei Dong and myself and a few other people worked out on Christmas Day. And now I think, you know, if we have holidays, people are always off going somewhere, and we always just cancel the class. But I remember working out on Christmas Day.
Okay, that's good.
In terms of changes, I think the biggest change is just the variety of disciplines that we're drawing from here. Of course, even in the early days, we were aware that we utilized judo and aikido and wing chun and so forth, but we really only had sort of an inkling of that. And then when he came, and he had to go back to Vietnam. When he came back here and took over the association again as a head instructor, it just seemed like it was a vast array of techniques that we had this much, and then all of a sudden it was this way. So that we had some judo, we had some aikido, we had wing chun, we had more weapons. He kept adding on and adding on and adding on, so that now it's so wide that no one can be an expert in all the fields, so we tend to specialize in certain things. And I was lucky enough to be here most of the time for my training and work under Sensei himself, and was able to specialize more in the soft style aspects and the new katas, new one, new two, some judo, some aikido, and that kind of thing, which is a little different than it was early on. It seemed like it was more hard style early on, and now it's spread out to so many disciplines. It's such a wide variety. I think that's what sets us aside from some of the other styles, aside from our philosophy, of course, is that.
Okay, when Sensei Dong left in the month of June 1974, he left in the United States approximately 10 black belts. Most of us black belts at that time have about 3 years experience. And there are a lot of people from other styles that have predicted that we would not be able to carry over New when Sensei Dong left. But I think the black belts got together and formed a black belt instruction committee, and the board of directors was very much behind efforts of black belt. So I remember the summer class of 1974, where we have almost 100 students. And the class in the fall of 1974, the samurai class, we had almost 200 students. And the class after that, Indian class that was taught by Sensei Frank Vanessa, we have over 200 students in Florida field. When Sensei left, after the month of April 1975, when the communist government took over Vietnam, we heard news that he was killed. And so what I remember the most at that time was a lot of sadness. In the community in Gainesville, the students, friends and family of Kim Yu, and we held a memorial service on campus at the University of Florida for Sensei Dong, and it was attended by over 500 people at that time. I think near the end of 1976, I think the black belts instructor at that time got together and decided that we need a headquarters, and so we decided to move to the location on West University Avenue, where the center operated for the next 10 years. As to the differences between now, 1991, after 20 years in the U.S., and 1971, or about the time of 1974, I would say that at that time the requirement for black belt was a lot less than now. Now it seems that a lot of black belts know many more techniques than we did at that time. I think the spirit has grown a lot stronger through interaction with many schools, and when you look back, when we had one school in Gainesville, a school in Miami, a school in Tallahassee, compare with 40 or more schools now we have in the U.S. and overseas, I think Kung Yu have really made a great step forward. So I think our future is in great hands because we have a lot of people working together.
Hi, Ron. I'm Ulysses. I started Kung Nu in December 1972. What stands out mostly to me is that we dominated the football field, even though the football players were there at the time, and that's really a hard thing to do. As I can remember, we had a strong membership of almost seemingly 300 people at the time. During the times, some of the evenings, the football players would sit in the stands and wait for us to finish. I enjoyed what we called at that time, or what was known that time as Doug's Rug, otherwise the AstroTurf. Our D's didn't get as dirty. If it weren't lightning, we were able to stay outside in all the weather. I think the toughest part about working out outside after dark, especially the summer months, no doubtly had to be the mosquitoes. Persons whom have come through Kung Nu now or then at that time has numbered in the few short hundreds, a very few hundreds of persons who've gone through. I'm sorry that we're just not in touch with some of those people at this time. But even though when we get to have our regular seminars, more and more I'm seeing few faces from old who are trickling back in and coming back around to the style again. It's wonderful for me. It's a great opportunity for me to be well thought of and remembered by those persons, even though now names and faces have started to elude me somewhat. One change that I certainly enjoy is that our gis, or uniforms, are not as short. When we first had the first set of gis, they seemingly came about 3/4 of the legs. It was quite an embarrassment for me at that time. Katas now are more openly, we don't have the straight line and hard line of everyone having to do the same katas or the same techniques the same. We're all free to do a variety of techniques as according to his or her ability, his or her natural ability. I guess the only thing that ever lasts is change. Changes, we're always reminded of evolution, of our style. The changes that are now before us, the katas, that we have a lot more freedom of expression of forms. And I think that's one of the most important factors in Kung Nu at this present time.
Okay, well, early Kung Nu. I had a girlfriend, her name was Donna Goldstein, that some people might remember. And back in 71, and in early 72, she was taking a Kung Nu class. And one night she said, why don't you come and try the class? So I started out in Kung Nu because of a young lady, and she stayed in Kung Nu to brown belt. But the thing I remember most about the first class was the first picnic. And at that time I was taking a creative writing class. And I was really scared of the first picnic and the first test. And going to the very first test, I don't remember where it was exactly, but remember making a couple mistakes doing the first katas. And I remember the push-up contest where I only did 36 push-ups or 38, and I lost. I came in second or third place. And when I got home, I had this great vision of what I just was through, and I wrote an essay for my creative writing class. It was the Kung Nu Karate Club field day, and what I saw in the vision, though, was kind of an image of these ancient monks or warriors in Japan or someplace like that, and I actually felt something tying me to the past, to all the martial art heritage, and I actually felt like a spirit growing within me. And from that day on, I was like a fanatic. I don't know, it fueled everything I did from that day on, from that picnic, the very first picnic. And that's the biggest thing I remember. In the beginning, the Kung Nu style was very hard, and the soft style was a very small aspect. It was not completely defined. It was actually poorly defined, and you could almost sense O-sensei Dong's kind of experimenting with kind of what level of soft style and when to bring it to people's into the curriculum.
I started training Kung Nu here in Gainesville in 1972, and this place has a lot of meaning for me because it was the first place that I started training with a martial arts that didn't just bring across animosity. I came from another style, and I was almost in trouble because of the training I was receiving from the other people. And training the Kung Nu with Master Dong within a few months really just turned me around. Right. Started at the basement of the Florida gym, and I recall that when O-sensei turned 37 years old, we asked him, well, I'll take that back. One year it was O-sensei's birthday, and we found out, and so we asked him, Sensei, how old are you going to be? And he said, 37. And John Benson said, Sensei, excuse me, but that's how old you were last year. The only instructor we had here was O-sensei, whom we called back then Sensei Dong. He was the only black belt, he was the only instructor. And things have really changed since then. The highest forms that we knew were Shinte. The highest bow form we knew was the first bow form. We didn't use tambos back then. We didn't use nunchaku, kama, or sai, or any of these weapons. We were just a bunch of people in a hot basement working out, getting ready for what Master Dong knew would happen 20, 30 years later, which is Kung Nu today. People like Sensei Lop and Sensei Mary Davis and Frank Van Essen and all that main first group that started with the Dragon class. You think that they always had a black belt. Well, that's not the case because I remember seeing them before they had a green belt.
One of the earliest memories I have is of the first Dragon in the homecoming parade. It was 1977. Sensei Dong had just come back from Vietnam with his family, and it was real important to him for us to do that. We built this humongous big papier-mâché dragon head that must have weighed about at the time. Had all the big strong guys, the advanced ranks. I was a beginner at the time, carrying the head, and the rest of us were dispersed along the body, and I got to carry the ribbons at the tail. Our class, which started in 1973, was real big, and no one had gis yet. We hadn't even taken our first test yet. So for those people who were able to borrow gis and things, since they went around passing out green belts, so that everybody would have rank and would be impressive to the public. We were all real proud of ourselves, obviously, but we had to give them back. When we took our test, very few people had gis. We were all wearing white shorts and white t-shirts. And it was a lot of fun when we finally got our gis. I know we were all real proud of them, and we spent the whole class learning how to put them on and tie our belts and do all that kind of stuff. There were 225 people in our class, so it was kind of noisy, but we had a real good time. We were all real proud of our first gis. Some of the changes I've seen over the 18 years I've been in are basically the curriculum things and requirements for testing. When I took my black belt test, you only had to know 12 katas. We didn't do them to the right. We didn't do them ebb. There were just real basic things, and a lot of the students who are taking black belt now are doing requirements that I did for Nidan and Sandan. Things were introduced as we went along, and we had to perform them at whatever level we were when they were introduced. I know I did Tambo 1 for my Nidan, and people are having to do it now for black belt and earlier even. So things have changed a lot. The things that haven't changed are the feelings that everybody develops for each other, the love and caring, the push for perfection, the general spirit development, and wanting to be a big family all over the country. I don't think that's ever going to change. I've made it to all the camp houses. This is my 14th one. I probably will never, ever miss one. I plan my May and my life around these things. So hopefully that will continue, and the camaraderie will be better, as always it is. It always gets better. I never know how it does. And skit nights will get funnier.
Beautiful. When are we going on? The morning, do you remember the morning we first got?
Yeah.
We'd been up all night. We'd started, God knows how many weeks ahead of time.
Probably a couple months.
Yeah, and painting every weekend. But it got down to the last minute and the damn thing was still not assembled. So here we are all night, the night before the first parade, and we're mostly white belts and a few brown belts.
There were no black belts.
There were no black belts.
There were none.
Painting in this hot garage on the east side of Gainesville. And we finished the assembly at about 7:30 the morning of the parade and moved the head for the first time from where it was built to the truck that would take it to the assembly field. Of course, that was the first time any of us had picked it up. It was paper mache, it looked beautiful, it was painted. Of course, none of us had really done the calculation that 2x4 and chicken wire and lots of paper mache was going to be extremely heavy. So it took 16 men to pick it up, put it in the truck. Brought it over, we put the dragon together, and then we had a hell of a time trying to move it down the parade route. Because every 600-700 yards, you'd have to change the guys who were carrying it, because only 2 people had handholds of the 16. The rest of us were holding on to the 2x4 supports like this, right? And then one guy in the middle trying to squirt the fire extinguisher out of the dragon's mouth, simulating fire. Of course, he's under there trying to follow the mouth as we're all trying to keep a hold of the thing.
You could see feet on either side of the head. Some would be going forward along the parade route, some are sideways, and some are backwards, going backwards. It was really fun.
And of course, the erratic motions of the head propagated that too. Made it probably more realistic looking, but propagated back to the body. The real problem was, by the time we did it, we skipped a year.
I think so.
Yeah, we skipped a year and we did it the second time. By the time we did it again, I was the only person left who remembered how it was put together. Everybody else who was on the construction team had moved on to other things, so I became the dragon assembler for the next, until I left Gainesville in 1978.
One of the things was we had to be at the parade ground real early to set up. And I mean early, like the parade was at 11 and you had to be there at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. I think we were a little late. And then you sat around, and so
Fell asleep.
everybody went to sleep, their bodies went.
Okay, well, stationed in Vietnam as a psychological operations officer, I was assigned to make contact with a rather controversial professor from Hue University. After reading his dossier we had on him, I arranged through a third party to meet him on the subject of judo, since that seemed to be something that we were commonly interested in. Once we came in contact with each other, we formed a very quick friendship. Became a guest at their house for dinner several times. And we had an ongoing relationship in the martial arts for approximately 9 months. During that time, I was able to scrounge up by trading certain commodities with the Marine station at Fubai. We were able to fabricate mats and martial arts equipment for the dojo at Hue University. We both officiated at the University Games in Hue in 1966. And I left the country in late 1966 and didn't hear from or about long again until last year, when Joe Montague called me at home, stated that they had been trying to find me, and that Dong was alive and well and living in Gainesville with his family. I was really overjoyed to hear that he and the family had made it out. And the invitation came to come to the camp out. And last year was a very pleasant, very traumatic, emotionally, I guess, because seeing somebody that you had to put together a very friendly and very caring relationship with, and finding that they were safe and well, and seeing them again for 25 years was really a high point for the year for me.